Hello and welcome to this chess endgame review of how to win a rook and pawns chess endgame. So in this position, it is black's turn to move. So I'll play the game with white on the bottom. But if you want to take a look at this position, I'll flip the board from black's perspective here as well. So with black to move, what would you do here if it's your turn and you have the black pieces? So how would you try and gain an advantage here? So take a look at that. Pause the video if you need to. If not, I'm going to flip it back and I'll just play it from white's perspective here for the rest of the game. So if it was black's turn to move, it looks like, well, material-wise, everything is even. So before I show you how to continue, let's look at the differences between white and black's position here. So white does have this passed pawn in the center, but it's isolated and it could be weak if the king and the rook try to target that. Now it is black's turn. Black could immediately check the white king and then snatch up this pawn on a3. But that could give white some counterplay. Now one thing to notice in this position is the number of pawn islands. So we see a pawn island is just a group of pawns. So this would be an island, just one pawn by itself. This would be another one. And this is a pawn island. These pawns are all connected. So white has 3 pawn islands and black only has 2. And usually the more pawn islands you have, or groupings of pawns that are separated from each other, the more of those you have, the harder it is going to be to defend all of those pawn islands. So black will have a little easier time defending his 2 pawn islands compared to white, who has an isolated A pawn and an isolated D pawn. So let's continue here. I'll turn on the analysis and we can look at the details. So you may have thought that black should just check the king with rook to c3 and snatch up this pawn, but that could give white counterplay. So white could move forward, and then once you take this pawn, you do have this pair of pawns that can try and march forward, and that could be a threat. But white could jump up here to d5. Black, let's see here. Turn on the evaluation and the analysis as well. So in this position, it looks like king to e7 would be black's best move. And that king could do a good job of stopping this passed pawn here. But black does have these, the pair of pawns over here. But the king up here guarding this pawn could give white counterplay. So instead of allowing white to have any counterplay like that, it may be better, instead of snatching that pawn, to stop the counterplay of this king with king to e6. And so we see that king to e6 gives almost a 1 pawn's worth advantage, where rook to c3 is about a half a pawn's advantage. So by moving the king forward, it will cut off white's king from trying to come up here and escort his pawn up and get counterplay. And so then the game would continue with rook to b3 now, preventing a check and a capture of this a pawn. But now the king is allowed to move in here and stop this white king from moving forward. All right, and just remember, it is important in endgames to activate your king, activate your rooks. So you want your pieces to be more active, and what I mean by active is give them more mobility instead of putting them into defensive roles. So here we see the black king and the black rook are attacking, and the white rook and the white king are more passive and playing defense. So they're worrying about defending while black is dictating the play of the game by attacking and forcing white to respond to that attack. So the rook is forced to defend here, but now we see f5. So this starts to limit white's options here of what his pawns can do. Now, by this f5 pawn move, white's f pawn cannot move forward, and the g pawn cannot move forward or it will be captured. And so h3 is played by white, and now h5. So now this limits white even more. Now he can't push the g pawn, or it would be captured and then recapture, and then black would have a passed pawn over here. So white is running out of moves and decides to give up this pawn. We could look at, well, what if he just did this? Well, then, black could play this, and black also has, a possible move of pushing this pawn, but white will have to retreat anyway, and this pawn will fall here. He's in a zugzwang position, which basically means, whatever he does, it's going to be a disadvantage for him, no matter what he moves. And he's being forced to retreat his king. So the king retreats back, and then the pawn is captured. Now, in an endgame, when you are behind in material, you do not want to trade rooks here, because if the rooks were traded off, then this extra pawn here would break through, and white would have to try and stop that, and then black could just march over here and capture all these pawns and escort one of his pawns forward to promotion. So now white, being behind a pawn, must avoid trading these rooks. So the rook moves here to c3, and then we have rook to e4 with check, and so the king just slides over. But now we have this. h4 is being played to break apart this pawn island and break it apart into, two pawn islands. So if the g pawn would have captured, well, then the rook could have captured the f pawn and then attack this h pawn. The pawns would have fallen. So another good piece of advice in endgames, especially these rook and pawn endgames, is to activate your rooks. So instead of keeping this rook here to play defense, white tries to get counterplay by moving up here and activating his rook where it can attack this pawn. So after capture, we have capture, capture, and capture. So once again, black is still ahead an extra pawn. He has a pawn majority here and this passed pawn here. White does have this passed pawn, but he cannot move it, or the rook would just capture. So black continues by moving his king over here to protect this isolated passed pawn, and white wants to get in front of this pawn if he can to stop it from promoting. So the rook swings over to the other side of the board where it could cause problems checking the white king from there. And white tries to activate his rook attacking here. But after the rook protects this a6 pawn, we have once again white's rook playing a passive role here, defending the a pawn. And now we have f4. Whenever you have a passed pawn, well, I shouldn't say whenever, but usually when you have a passed pawn, you want to try and push that passed pawn. The closer it gets to promotion, the bigger advantage you'll have as that pawn moves forward. But you have to be careful that you don't push it forward too fast where it could become a target. At least here it's protected by the rook, and it's attacking white's rook, forcing him to move. So he swings over to the other side of the board, but now the rook moves out of this passive spot on a4 to c4 here, where it could harass the white king. And now the king just steps back to see what black will do, and the king moves forward and will try and escort this f pawn forward. And so now white is running out of options, and he lashes out and just pushes this pawn forward. Although if we go back, it looks like it would have been better to just hold this pawn here and maybe, well, he's just running out of moves because this rook really can't do much. It can't go to it can't go to c3 or d3. All of its squares are cut off, so really only the king can move forward up here. Anyway, let's see how the game concludes. So white lashes out with h4, and then f3 is played, pushing this pawn even further up the board. The king now must move over to stop this pawn, and now black swings around to the other side where he can keep an eye on this passed pawn of white's and his own pawn as well. So if we go back, the computer, it does recommend this king to f4 move as being best here. So now the pawn tries to jump up here, but it's too late because rook to c1 check. The king moves up to stop the pawn, but we have another check. And after king to e1 and g3, from here, the pawn is protected. The king cannot attack this pawn with the rook, and this black rook will be able to just swing over and pick off this h pawn. So here, white resigned in this position as he is losing. And I hope you enjoyed this example of how to win with a rook and pawns chess endgame, because they can be quite complicated. But just remember the pawn islands. Try not to break your pawns apart too much and have too many pawn islands because they're harder to protect. And we saw how black took advantage of that and was able to pick off one of white's pawns. And also, if you are ahead in material, it is good to trade off pieces. If you're behind in material, you want to avoid trading pieces, but see if you can trade off more pawns. And also, try to activate your king and your rook, activate your pieces and your king in the end game because every piece counts. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this chess endgame, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave comments or suggestions. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.